stuff. Matter of fact, way back when I was in seminary, how long ago was that? 1971, 72. I had a fellow named John Harvard. Actually, that's the name of the fellow who founded Harvard, but this guy was no relation. And we got together, 6 of us guys, John, myself, and 4 other guys. We got together in this big house, and we sat down for our first meeting about how we were going to work things out. And I'll clean up the language a little bit. John said, let's not have any of this yours, mine crap. I believe it, I cleaned that up a little bit, okay? And he was right, you know, we couldn't say, okay, well, this is my food here, this is my coffee, and all that. We just went and bought the basic staples, you know, and we threw it all together in one pot. Believe it or not, friends, in 1971 or 72, it only cost us $5 a week. 6 of us. Now, true, a lot of us hated the seminary because I worked washing dishes, and we worked someplace at a church on Sunday. Some people ate other meals out, but that was the reality. Okay, so 1 plus 1 equals 1. We're to be one flesh in marriage, but 1 plus 1 also equals 2 in marriage, like the correct arithmetic equation. Because marriage requires 2 healthy, whole people growing together, looking to care for each other. So it's also 1 plus 1 equals 2. We need 2 whole, healthy people working at this thing. It's not 1/2 plus 1/2, you know, equals, you know, 1 flesh in marriage, because that gives you the idea that, oh, it's 50-50. Marriage is 50-50. I do 50%, you know, the other one does 50%. No, we each do 100%. It's 100%. It's also not, I'm worth 1.5 and she's only worth 1/2, you know. Sometimes women especially get to feel that way, that they are the subordinate underling, and I'll have a little more to say about that later. Marriages don't fail. People do. People fail, people mess up, and that's why we need 2 whole, healthy people growing together in spiritual, psychological, mental, emotional, social maturity. Now, your spouse, as you probably realize, how many people have been married more than 30 years? All right. Your spouse, as you might realize, has the opportunity to cause you more pain than anybody else, because you spend a lot of time together and you have such a depth of relationships. That's why you need to learn how to care for one another. I'm going to go out on a limb here. She didn't know I was going to say this. Wouldn't you say that I have learned over the 30-some years we've been married to better care for you?
Yes. Just about 200% improvement.
Look at that. That still only means I'm at 50, because I was way down, you know, when we got started here. But that's why we need to grow in this relationship. You can't look to marriage to make you whole. I mean, some people look to get married and they say, oh, this is going to make me a whole, complete person. This is going to make me a better person. This is going to take care of, you know, I need to get married because I don't know how to cook or clean or, you know, whatever. I don't know. But, you know, that's partly true because, as we talked about with the yin-yang, we complete one another, but we can't look to marriage to make us whole. We need maturity, and that connects us to last week's message of coming to maturity spiritually. And next week's message is going to be on 3 kinds of people. And one of the kinds of people is somebody who's self-focused all the time. We've got to get out of that. We need to focus outward. We need to focus on giving, on developing relationships, caring for your partner and other people. Now, probably most of you know that you remember things or you learn things better by sharing it with somebody, you know, when you learn it, you share it with somebody, or by doing it, you know, you learn it better. I've had a hard time sometimes remembering jokes. I have a page that somebody sent me one time, I apologize for blondes, about blonde jokes. And they had one for every month of the year, and I remember some of them because I use them more often. The blonde got stuck on the escalator when the power went out. Now think about that, come on. Think about that. And she had a convertible car, and so she was locked out of it, and it got swamped with water when it rained. It's a convertible car, folks. Okay. All right, the best one is probably at Thanksgiving. She cooked a turkey for 4 days and totally burnt it because the directions said cook 1 hour for each pound, and she weighed 108 pounds. Okay. any rate, you remember those things because you say them and share them a lot. Genesis 2:18, go back to Genesis, that word helper. Now, first of all, the King James is totally wrong when it says help meet. And they made it one word. Okay, what it should say is, God said to the man, I am going to make you a helper fit for you, or a helper suitable for you. If you look at the modern translations, they all say that. And so the meet word was an old word that meant suitable or fit. So God said, I'm going to make a helper fit or suitable for you. Now, that word helper is not the subordinate or the underling, because guess what? That Hebrew word helper is used for God, to describe God. In Psalm 33:20, it says, God is my help and my security, or my strength. He used to describe God. He's certainly not a subordinate or an underling. So, first of all, get that out of your mind, when you talk about, a woman in marriage. And then Ephesians 5. I got to read this because, again, when we did premarital counseling, it was always fun. As an aside, I remember one couple that came to the Forks of the Brandywine to get married, and they hadn't been part of the church before, and they came, and they would come periodically to worship. And I can't believe it, but almost every time they came, and this woman was a good women's liver. Almost every time they came, I was preaching on Ephesians 5 or something about, wives submitting to husbands or something like that, and it probably drove her crazy and all of that. But at any rate, in Ephesians 5, first of all, it starts out in verse 21. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. So let's not have any of this, as a friend of mine used to humorously say, to his wife, Achtung, like Hitler, submit, woman, he was being funny, I hope. And, it's not that, because it says submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. Not as if he is the Lord, but out of your worship and obedience to the Lord. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church. Now, one thing to say is, the amount of space given to the wives is, like 2 or 3 verses. As the church submits to Christ, so also wives submit to their husbands and everything. But then you get to the husbands, and there's about 7 or 8 verses about the husbands. And I used to say, you know what? The husband's got the harder deal. Especially with all these, bless you, with all these women's, liver people back 20 years ago, I used to say, look, it says submit. Okay, if you don't like that word, try adapt. Wives, adapt to yourselves to your husbands. Follow your husbands, okay? Follow your husband's leadership. Because the husband has the harder deal. What's the comparison in this passage? The comparison is husband-wife relationship is compared to what? Christ and the church. Okay. The husband is compared to Christ. He's perfect. He's God. That's the role model for the husband. I dare say, women and ladies, if your husband was loving you and serving you like Jesus Christ, you probably wouldn't have too much trouble submitting to him and following his leadership. And what's the image for the wife? The church. Oh, we're all perfect, aren't we? Yeah, we never sin. We're all perfect. No. The wife's example is the church, which doesn't necessarily operate perfectly. So I'm not dumping on the wives or anything. I'm just saying, husbands, to me, have the harder job if you really look at this text here. Okay. I think you got that. Last mathematical equation. We had 1 + 1 = 1. We're one flesh. 1 + 1 = 2. It takes 2 whole healthy people growing together to make things work. And the wife is not submissive to the husband in the bad senses of the word. And then I really didn't know what to do with this. I've changed this since we talked. Wife. 1 + 1 + 1 = infinity. 1 man plus 1 woman plus God is an infinite amount of resources and power for the relationship. You like that better? Yeah, I thought she would. Okay. Every now and then I do something wonderful without it being her idea. Okay. So 1 man, 1 woman, 1 infinite God, undergirding, changing, strengthening, loving us first so that we can love. God created the home as the perfect triangle of man, woman, and God. That's why we got 1 + 1 + 1 = infinity. So Ecclesiastes 4:12, very famous verse.